What's up, YouTube? It's time for a review of the new Gojira record, Magma, out this past Friday, June 17th. With Gojira's 6th album here, we're talking about one of the most acclaimed bands in the metal mainstream. We're talking about a band that has been totally distinct within metal, first of all, because they're from France and that kind of separates them, but their lyrical content addresses environmental issues and other topics that are pretty unconventional for the genre. And then musically, they specialize in these militant grooves and more of a droning aggression amongst the typical standards for extreme metal. Especially as far as extreme metal goes, the music isn't too chaotic or too crazy or too avant-garde, but it generates this masterful sense of brooding darkness. Like they're the type of band that can convince you that you and all your loved ones are meeting a really ugly demise, even if it's a bright sunny day and you just got laid. I mean, the space that they've carved for themselves in extreme metal is real unique. And on top of all that, we're talking about a band that is coming off a near flawless trio of albums. We're talking, of course, about 2005's For Mars to Sirius, 2008's The Way of All Flesh, and 2012's unpronounceable L'Enfant Sauvage. Now, this last one, L'Enfant Sauvage, did have its detractors who said that it pushed them into a more mainstream direction and all that shit. But if you ask me, those people didn't really have a leg to stand on, because aside from maybe the title track, which was more simplified and more melodic, it really was business as usual for the band. It's the same sounds, the same really heavy riffs, the same sort of vocals. So I feel like there are some bands that are just more prone to, like, if they change one thing, people lose their shit. People forget that it all really sounds the same to a sorority girl. It's not like they're trying to be pop stars. But even with the title track, if you ask me, the quality of music did not suffer for this change, which, that track is a little more simplified. There's a little bit of clean singing in it. So with all that being said, all that context, really just leading me to one point here. It's not an outlandish statement to call this record, Magma, one of the most anticipated metal releases of the year. And the record was actually produced and co-mixed by the band's frontman, Joe Duplantier, and it's made in dedication to him and his brother Mario, who's the band's drummer, their late mother who passed away last summer. It was preceded by two main singles. The Shooting Star did come out 4 days before the record, but two main singles, Silveira and Stranded, and I want to launch right into them and just start analyzing those tracks. But first, I gotta get one thing off my chest right off the bat. I don't want to hear about the clean singing. If you listen to a track like Global Warming off their most celebrated album, From Mars to Sirius, you clearly can tell that clean singing has a place in this band's music. How it's utilized, of course, is a discussion, but this album is not to be judged based on the presence or the absence of clean singing. All right. Rant over, now let's talk about Silveira. To me, this song immediately felt like a logical progression from L'Enfant Sauvage's title track, in that it takes that track's condensed, compacted structure and composition a step further, yet it still sounds like Gojira through and through. It features incredibly tight instrumental performances, which are abundant on this whole record, but specifically showcased here. And that exotic tapping lick with the melodic vocals on top of it, it feels like familiar territory for Gojira, even if it is within a real bluntly straightforward track like this one. Silveira also has the most moving lyrical content on the entire LP, talking about the responsibility of the individual, the role of the individual in the direction that society is going. It's kind of a call to arms and a call for accountability. And my other favorite part is that the fucking lead section of this track. Really, like, Gojira is one of the few metal bands that is able to use lead sections to effectively advance a song rather than just for wankery. And oddly enough, this lead section is the absolute climax of the song. And if you listen closely, those distant vocals in the background during this tapping section just give it so much more character. So, thumbs up on Silveira. Stranded, the other main single, is definitely the most stripped down Gojira has ever been. But guess what? It works magnificently. They are just as successful here being concise and to the point as they have been in the past being epic and long-winded. This track features a series of undeniable grooves that just make your body want to move, whether it's that quirky main riff or it's that bullseye of a hard rock chorus. Joe's vocal performance is outstanding throughout. I especially love how the guitars drop out in the second verse and let everything kind of pull back. Mario's drum fills and quick little groove switch at the tail end of the song, phenomenal. And there's one lyric I particularly wanted to point out that really stuck with me. The cure is somewhere in the silence, but I'm crushed by the noise inside. That's a cool line. Ironically, Stranded is easily one of the best tracks on the album to me. As a Gojira fan for 8 years, I got into them right before The Way of All Flesh. As a longtime Gojira fan, it felt completely fresh to me, and it felt like this confident leap into new territory. And you know what? It's not necessarily a bad thing that I now have a particular place to point more hard rock oriented fans that want to give Gojira a chance. And it's all done at zero artistic cost, if you ask me. Now, as you get into the meat of the record, it becomes apparent that even given these departures into other sounds and other structures, a good chunk of this material sounds like the classic Gojira we know and love. A track like The Cell features this growling verse riff, and Joe's vocals during the chorus are on that strained precipice between melodic and harsh that should feel familiar to Gojira fans. The track Pray is more quintessential Gojira and is absolutely one of the strongest songs on the album. The intro definitely puts their Fear Factory influence on full display, but then the verses are pure From Mars to Sirius. So there you go, they still have it in them. And vocally, this is one where the clean singing actually sounds just as menacing as the screaming, and as a result, the song has that classic, uncompromising Gojira sound. Not to mention, that fucking breakdown that occurs at the 3-minute 45-second mark is one of the best moments on the entire album. And the next track, Only Pain, I have similar praise for in terms of Gojira's beloved brand of extreme metal being heavily present. On the other hand, there's Lowlands, track 9, which is definitely more unorthodox for the band. It's dominated by melodic singing, and it features 4 minutes of just really steady tension building before it arrives at the money riff. Now, when I say the money riff, I mean the most mind-bogglingly heavy, slamming moment on the entire record occurs about 4 minutes in, so yeah, it justifies its build-up. I will stress, though, that this album is not perfect and does have its drawbacks. First off, the guitar tone is a bit processed and not nearly as in-your-face as I would have liked and as I've come to expect from Gojira, and as a result, some of the material suffers, most noticeably the title track with its tremolo-picked main riff that ends up coming across a bit limp. The next issue to discuss here is the matter of The Shooting Star, the album's opening track. Clearly, they opted against having the typical crushing beginning and went with more of a subdued introduction to the record. I think the drums here, especially behind the main riff and the verses, are a bit too stripped down. There's a lot of space in these pretty simplistic riffs and grooves for some rhythmic experimentation that could really spice things up. That being said, this is a powerful song with a lot of memorable parts, mostly actually in Joe's clean vocals, but I just don't feel like it's an opener. And maybe that was the point, to keep listeners guessing, keep people on their toes. But if it were me, I would have sequenced this track third and opened with Silveira and The Cell, because I think this track would have functioned best as an atmospheric breather in between aggressive songs. In terms of the title cut, it certainly could have been condensed. It doesn't have enough dynamics to need 6+ minutes to make its point. It's a solid track, but when I hear it, I find myself wanting to hurry it along to that bridge section where it actually picks up steam. And in terms of Liberation, the closer, I love it on its own, but I really think that ending the album that way, it lets the record sort of whimper out instead of a forceful final statement. If it's me, I take Liberation and replace it with the pointless Yellowstone, which is in the direct middle of the record, and then end it with that crushingly heavy ending to Lowlands. So there are things about Magma that I would change, but overall it's another phenomenal installment in the Gojira discography. Is it slightly weaker and less exhilarating than the previous 3 albums they put out? Perhaps. But by how much? The difference especially becomes negligible when you continue to compare Gojira to their peers, and just how much more interesting their music continues to be in the overall metal landscape. Not to mention, they made some of their best music ever on this album as well. So, saying that Magma doesn't live up to the last 3 albums is like saying Megadeth's Countdown to Extinction record didn't live up to Rust in Peace and Peace Sells. I mean, you could technically be right, but it's really a moot point. Of course, time will tell, and I'm really interested, especially with this record, to see how I feel about it like in a few months and at the end of the year when I do my year-end lists. But as of this moment, Magma gets a 9 out of 10 from me. As always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, or shoot me a message so we can continue to talk music, and I'll see you guys soon.